Hey there, nerds of the internet. Did you know that ancient Greece was even wilder than a chariot race after a toga party? This is not what they taught you in school. Think ancient Greece was all togas and wise old men quoting Socrates? Think again. Today, we're counting down 10 absolutely true, hilariously weird facts about ancient Greece that'll blow your sandals off. Let's go. All right, let's talk about the Olympics, ancient Greece's biggest, baddest, and yes, barest spectacle. Imagine this. You're settling into the stadium, the crowd's roaring, the athletes are lined up, and they're all completely naked. In ancient Greece, athleticism was next to godliness, and what better way to honor the gods than by stripping down and showing off those Olympian physiques? They believed it was all about celebrating the human form in its purest form. They even got a word for it, gymnos, meaning naked, which is where we get our word gymnasium. Makes those awkward moments in the locker room seem a little less awkward, right? You've got your chariot races, your wrestling matches, your javelin throws, all happening in the buff. Can you imagine the commentary? And he's going for the gold with nothing on but a smile. Honestly, it makes the modern Olympics seem downright boring in comparison. All right, folks, meet Diogenes of Sinope, the OG philosopher troll, the master of shade, the king of keeping it real, maybe a little too real. This guy was so committed to his beliefs that he decided to ditch the whole house thing and live in a giant clay jar. But here's the thing, Diogenes wasn't just some eccentric dude with a pottery fetish. He was making a statement. He believed in living a simple life, free from material possessions and societal norms. And what better way to stick it to the man than by rejecting the very concept of personal space? Talk about a minimalist. Diogenes was basically the human embodiment of a philosophical mic drop. He wandered the streets of Athens, challenging people's values, mocking their hypocrisy, and generally being a thorn in the side of anyone who took themselves too seriously. One time, Alexander the Great, the conqueror of the known world, came to meet Diogenes. Alexander, feeling pretty good about himself, asked Diogenes if there was anything he could do for him. Diogenes, without missing a beat, looked up and said, "Yeah, you're kind of blocking my sunlight." Boom. Roasted by a guy living in a pot. All right, let's talk about Sparta, the ancient Greek city-state that was basically the real-life version of the Hunger Games, but with more abs and less dystopian fashion. These guys took their training seriously, especially when it came to their soldiers. We're talking about an education system where stealing wasn't just allowed, it was practically part of the curriculum. Enter the Agoga, Sparta's brutal boot camp-style training program that turned boys into lean, mean fighting machines. From the age of 7, Spartan boys were ripped from their families, thrown into military-style barracks, and taught to survive on their wits and, well, their ability to steal. Food was scarce in the Agoge, see? It was all part of the Spartans' master plan to make their soldiers resourceful and fearless. So these kids were encouraged to sneak out, scavenge, and yes, even steal food to supplement their meager rations. But here's the catch, if they got caught, they weren't punished for stealing. Oh no, they were punished for being dumb enough to get caught. Chapter 4. Athenian democracy. Not as democratic as you'd think. So you know how everyone always talks about how ancient Greece was the birthplace of democracy? Well, hold your horses, it's a bit more complicated than that. While it's true that Athens gave us the concept of democracy, their version was a little exclusive. Like a VIP club where the bouncer was a toga-wearing dude named Only Dudes Allowed. Here's the deal. Only free men born in Athens could vote. That means women? Out of luck. Slaves? Nope. Foreigners who lived and worked in Athens? Not a chance. All in all, only about 10 to 15% of the population actually got to participate in this whole rule by the people thing. Don't get me wrong, the Athenian system was revolutionary for its time. Chapter 5, Ancient Advice. The original life coaches were high on gas. All right, let's talk about oracles, those mysterious figures who were basically the ancient Greek version of life coaches, but with more cryptic pronouncements and fewer self-help books. The most famous oracle of them all, the Oracle of Delphi, a woman named Pythia, who was basically the spiritual CEO of the ancient world. People came from far and wide to consult with the Pythia, seeking her wisdom on everything from matters of love and war to whether or not their crops would grow that year. But here's the thing. The Pythia wasn't just dispensing sage advice based on her years of experience and wisdom. Nope, she was high, like really high. You see, the Oracle of Delphi sat in a chamber filled with, shall we say, interesting gases, probably ethylene, which seeps up from the ground. These gases had some pretty intense effects, inducing trances and hallucinations. So basically, the Pythia was getting high on the fumes and then delivering pronouncements that were often vague, cryptic, and open to interpretation. But hey, that's part of what made the oracles so powerful. Chapter 6, Mount Olympus, where the gods went wild. Alright, let's be real for a second. Greek mythology is basically the greatest soap opera ever written. We're talking love affairs, betrayals, power struggles, family drama, all starring a cast of characters who were as flawed and dysfunctional as they were powerful. At the center of it all, Zeus, the king of the gods, who was basically the ancient Greek equivalent of a rock star, powerful, charismatic, and a little too fond of the ladies. And by a little, I mean he had more affairs than you could shake a lightning bolt at. Hera, Zeus's wife, was not about to let her husband's philandering go unpunished. She was known for her jealousy and her elaborate schemes to get revenge on Zeus and his many, many lovers. Talk about a power couple. But it wasn't just Zeus and Hera. The whole pantheon of Greek gods was a hot mess of tangled relationships, petty squabbles, and epic grudges. It's enough to make you wonder if they ever got anything done on Mount Olympus, or if they were too busy with their own drama to, rule the cosmos. Alright, let's talk about entertainment, ancient Greek style. Forget Netflix, forget movie theatres. In ancient Greece, the hottest ticket in town was a seat in the theatre. We're talking massive amphitheatres carved into hillsides that could seat up to 14,000 people. Imagine that for a second, 14,000 people all gathered together to experience the power of live theatre. And it wasn't just a quick hour or two of entertainment, we're talking all-day affairs. People would pack a lunch, bring the whole family and settle in for a full day of theatrical immersion. And what were they watching, you ask? Tragedies, mostly. And to lighten the mood after all that emotional intensity, they'd throw in a comedy at the end. Alright, time to meet a true genius you've probably never heard of. Hero of Alexandria, an inventor, mathematician and engineer who was so far ahead of his time it's almost scary. We're talking about the mind that brought us the world's first vending machine over 1600 years before the modern version was invented. But Hero didn't stop there. He went on to create all sorts of mind-blowing inventions like a wind-powered organ, a self-filling wine bowl, and even a rudimentary steam engine. Hero of Alexandria. Proof that sometimes the line between genius and sorcery is thinner than you think. Alright, let's talk about ancient Greek medicine, a fascinating blend of surprisingly accurate observations, wacky theories and treatments that ranged from the brilliant to the downright bizarre. On the one hand, you had Hippocrates, often hailed as the father of medicine, who revolutionized the way people thought about illness. He believed that diseases had natural causes, not supernatural ones, and that observation and careful documentation were key to understanding and treating them. But then you had the treatments themselves, which were, well, let's just say they were a product of their time. Bloodletting, for example, was a popular remedy for just about everything. The idea was that by draining excess blood, you could restore balance to the body's humours, blood, phlegm, black bile and yellow bile, which were believed to control health and disease. And if bloodletting didn't work, well, there were always cabbage baths. It's enough to make you appreciate modern medicine, that's for sure. Alright, let's talk about women in ancient Greece, a complex and often overlooked aspect of this ancient civilization. Now, we all know that ancient Athens wasn't exactly a beacon of gender equality. Women were largely confined to the home, expected to marry young and bear children. They couldn't vote, own property, or participate in public life in the same way that men could. But that doesn't mean that women didn't wield power and influence. Aspasia, for example, was a brilliant philosopher and advisor to Pericles, one of Athens' most prominent statesmen. And then there were the priestesses, like the Pythia at Delphi, who held immense spiritual authority and were revered for their wisdom and insights. So while women in ancient Greece may not have had the same legal rights as men, they found ways to make their voices heard. So yeah, ancient Greece gave us democracy, drama, philosophy, and a bunch of very weird flexes that still echo today. From naked Olympics to philosophers living in barrels, they definitely knew how to keep things interesting. But here's the thing, beneath all the weirdness, there's a lot we can learn from the ancient Greeks. They were pioneers in art, science, philosophy, and government. They grappled with big questions about life, death, and the nature of the universe, and they left behind a legacy that continues to inspire and challenge us today. If you love this, wait till you hear what the Romans did. Hit that subscribe button, and I'll tell you why next week. Thanks for watching.